Hey everybody, Jamie Bateman here with Labrador Lending, and I want to shoot a quick video today about the topic of how passive is note investing. I'm basing this short video on an article that we wrote back in September 2020, about 6 months ago now. It was written by Stephen Berkey, who helps me out quite a bit with our business, and I helped edit it for him. So a lot of people like to tout the benefits of the passive nature, I guess, of note investing, and that can be true depending on how you define passive. But really, note investing can be extremely active, maybe not physically, but there can be a lot of moving parts. And so I think understanding the ways that you can approach note investing is critical, because you obviously want to marry up your goals with your strategy so that you can not find yourself in another full-time job, if you will. So what we go through in this article is different stages from very passive to very active. And you can see this on my screen here. So we have stage one is very passive. So a really good example of being very passive as a note investor would be investing in a fund, similar to a real estate fund or multifamily syndication. You can, if you've got more money than time, or more money than you care to, than effort that you care to put forth as far as running your own note business, investing in a fund can be a fantastic option, because you're spreading your risk among several different assets, and you're trusting the fund operator to do all the legwork for you and manage those notes. So that's stage one. That's an example of stage one, very passive. Stage two, we have hypothecation and purchasing partials, which can be very similar. Hypothecation, and we have a whole blog post on the difference between hypothecation and partials. We won't go into that here, but this approach, as far as buying partials, can be extremely passive, or lending on a hypothecation can be very passive. So you could almost put these into stage one in very passive, depending on how you set up the agreement and everything. Another example in stage two we have here is partnering with an experienced investor through a joint venture. So I found that joint ventures with note investing typically work best when you're purchasing a non-performing asset where there's a kind of a clearly defined exit point. And so, as opposed to a performing note where it kind of just keeps on going and going, and there may not be a clear exit point for you and for the two joint venture partners to kind of part ways on the deal. But partnering with an experienced investor through a joint venture, where oftentimes you're the money partner, a money partner partners up with the more day-to-day manager of the asset or multiple assets, and that can be pretty passive. You're normally making decisions together, major decisions, but if you're the money partner, you're probably not super involved. So we categorize that as rather passive. Stage three, somewhat passive. So purchasing performing notes. So here you've decided you want to be kind of, in a sense, an active note investor, and you want to purchase your own whole notes. Well, this is a whole different ballgame now. You've got to understand really what you're doing on the due diligence side of buying assets, and then asset management, and then hopefully not a whole lot while the borrower is just making monthly payments, assuming that the note becomes performing. Some people, their whole goal is to buy, 1 to 10 performing notes and kind of just hold them in their portfolio and not have too much to do. So this, again, can be considered somewhat passive. Stage four, rather active. Purchasing non-performing notes is a good example of a rather active note investing strategy. So you'll find that if you're intentionally buying non-performing notes, there's going to be a whole lot more going on, a lot of moving parts. your servicing fees are going to be higher because your servicer is hopefully doing more for you than they would be on a performing asset. You're going to be dealing with a lot of different vendors more than you would on a performing note. You're going to be dealing with attorneys and potentially dealing with the borrower, depending on what your plan is, what your exit strategy may be. So if you're getting into the non-performing note space, in some ways you are mitigating some of the risk of the performing compared to the performing world because you're paying a little bit less for those assets, hopefully. But definitely be ready to put in some time if you're going to get into the NPL space as a more active note investor. And then stage 5 here, we have very active. Managing a JV on a non-performing note. So if you're the day-to-day manager and you're taking other people's money and you're doing a deal together with that joint venture partner, again, you're making major decisions together, but for the most part, you as the day-to-day manager, you're taking on that active role, and this can be very active. And again, those joint ventures tend to work better on non-performing assets. So another example of very active would be managing a fund. And so managing a fund, you're often using other people's money in the form of oftentimes accredited investors who just want to put their money to work and potentially see a preferred return, maybe some upside on the split of any profits, but they're not doing a whole lot of actual management or work, and you as the fund manager are absolutely doing a lot of work. You've really got to have your systems in place and have some experience before you ever consider dabbling in managing a fund. In some ways, managing a fund can be a lot easier or more systematized, if you will, than managing a whole bunch of joint ventures. From a bookkeeping standpoint, it's much easier, but make no mistake, it's definitely an active thing. Are you out there, swinging a hammer or doing a lot of physical labor? No, but there are a lot of moving parts, and when you're taking on other people's money, you better be serious about actively managing that fund. So another way to look at this, and something that there's a whole lot of information in this blog post. By the way, this is, I think, the most informative blog post we've done. So I highly recommend people check out this article we did. It's entitled "How Passive is Note Investing?" LabradorLending.com. Just hit our blog page and read through all this. It goes into a lot of detail. Steven's an engineer, so we had to include a whole bunch of detail. But what's really neat is we also did this other diagram here that shows how an active note investor can partner up with a passive note investor. So hopefully you can see this okay. So on the passive side, on the upper left here, you've got investing in a fund, and then I guess converse of that is managing the fund. That's very active. And then also somewhat passive is being the money partner for a joint venture on a non-performing loan, and then across on the active side is managing a joint venture. So you can see here that there are a lot of ways for active note investors to partner up with passive note investors, and again, and so it goes from active to passive and passive to active. So note investing has so many different approaches to it, and that's one thing I really love about it. I mean, just like real estate, you can do what you want. I mean, you can buy one or two performers, like I said, and kind of just hold them for cash flow, much like a buy and hold rental property. You can scale your business and buy 50 non-performing notes and add value to each one of those, hopefully, and much like flipping properties, rehabbing properties. There's a lot of work there, and you better have your systems in place and know what you're doing in order to scale on that level. So as you can see, it really comes down to what you want to do. And so you have a lot of new note investors with questions like, should I get into performing or non-performing? Should I get into firsts or seconds? And I have a whole video on our YouTube page about 5 key decisions for new note investors. So I recommend you check that out. But again, how passive is note investing? Well, just like most things in life, it depends. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Feel free to check out the rest of our YouTube videos and subscribe to our newsletter, labradorlending.com. And I hope to chat with you soon. Thanks.